Good morning. I'm Earl Franks, Executive Director of the National Association of Elementary School Principals, NAESP. And on behalf of NAESP, the American Federation of School Administrators, and the National Association of Secondary School Principals, I want to welcome you to this Principals Policy Briefing and thank you for helping us honor school leaders during National Principals Month all October. I'm pleased that we are able to conduct this briefing in person for the first time since 2019. I'm especially grateful for the impressive panel of esteemed school leaders we have with us today. These outstanding school leaders are great representatives for the profession and their colleagues, all of whom we recognize and celebrate for their leadership of schools during National Principals Month. I also want to thank our distinguished guests for their participation in this briefing. Since his days as a law professor to his current role in Congress, Congressman Jamie Raskin knows the importance of educators and of educational leadership. Similarly, Assistant Secretary Roberto Rodriguez and his colleagues at the United States Department of Education have been helpful partners in our organization's work to comprehensively support the needs of school principals. We appreciate you being here and look forward to your comments. The focus of today's policy discussion couldn't be more timely or more critically important. Educator and staffing shortages hit schools especially hard during COVID. Staffing shortages long have affected schools, but because of the pandemic, they've gone from a chronic issue to an urgent problem. Stories from school leaders show that shortages may be worse now as we emerge from the pandemic than at the height of it. I'm glad we will be able to hear the firsthand experiences of principals in a variety of school settings and contexts. No school has gone unaffected by staffing shortages. It's imperative that we better understand the root causes of shortages and how they manifest themselves differently in different schools so that policymakers and other stakeholders can develop effective ways to address these issues. In my view, it will take a multi-pronged approach to change mindsets and practices that contribute to educator shortages. We can longer afford to tolerate 50% attrition rates for teachers in their first 5 years in the profession. We can no longer afford this. We all need to do a better job of onboarding new teachers and providing them with mentoring, orientation, and other supports they need to be effective teachers who want to remain in the classroom. Indeed, we should also be looking at improving the working conditions for all educators, including growth and leadership opportunities for teachers who want to stay in the classroom. Better compensation is a valuable piece of the puzzle. Inflation has only served to highlight and exacerbate the teacher pay gap between educators compared to college graduates who seek out comparable professions. As leaders, we also need to do a better job of promoting the profession. The recent PDK poll on the public attitudes on public education found that 62% of the public, the highest figure ever recorded in the poll's history, would not want a child of theirs to become a teacher. As leaders in education, we know the role of the teacher is so influential to student success, and it's up to us to help tell the stories of the positive things that are happening in the classrooms across the country. We have our work cut out for us to change these perceptions and to elevate the profession in the public's mind to be the noble calling we all know it to be. An educator shortage means educators are taking on multiple roles and wearing many hats. This doesn't come without a cost. Today, the panel will also discuss the mental and social emotional toll the pandemic has taken on principals, school staff, and students. Schools are experiencing a student mental health crisis that is leading to behavioral issues, discipline referrals, and absences. Equally as important as learning recovery is mental health and wellness support to get students back on track and a renewed sense of normalcy in school. School staff, and importantly, school leaders, are not immune from these pressures and anxieties. They put their students' needs first, often putting their own on the back burner. Just as they incorporate social emotional learning into every aspect of student learning, school leaders also need similar social emotional supports for themselves as they model leadership for their faculty and staff. Of course, issues like staffing shortages and mental health directly affect educational equity. It's important that we work through these issues to provide all students with the comprehensive supports they need, with particular care given to traditionally underserved populations and communities that have endured the worst effects from the pandemic. I look forward to the panel discussion and the comments of our guest speakers on these vitally important issues. School leaders, school principals serve a pivotal role in speaking to the practical issues in their schools and classrooms, as well as having a broader perspective on the systemic and policy solutions under which they all function. Their expertise and experience will be valuable insights to help address these issues of national concern. After the panel part of the event, I want to invite all of you to remain for lunch, where we can continue the conversation with each other, as I'm sure our speakers will give us much to think about and to discuss. Now it's my pleasure to introduce a friend and colleague, Ron Nazoy, a lifelong educator and the Chief Executive Officer at NASSP, an organization dedicated to transforming education through school leadership. Ron.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you very much to our panelists and moderator for taking the time to share their wisdom on one of the most pressing issues in education. And thank you, Earl, for that very nice introduction. My name is Ron Nazoy, and I'm pleased to serve as the CEO and Executive Director of NASSP, the National Association of Secondary School Principals. And I'm really excited and thrilled to be here to help kick off what I know will be a riveting and impactful discussion. But before we get started, I want to extend a sincere thank you and happy National Principals Month to the incredible school leaders in this room and around the country. So please give a round of applause for our outstanding educators in the room. From the pandemic to politics, there's no doubt that being a school leader has become increasingly challenging with more stressors these past few years. But the truth is, nothing can match your resolve. And we will never give up on our commitment to do right by our students, especially when we band together during this month of recognition for all the good work that you and your brothers and sisters all over the country do every single day. Together, we hold the power to transform our entire education system through courageous leadership and advocacy. United, we can reimagine and rebuild a system that makes real sense, one that ensures that every single student's needs are met and provides access and opportunity to achieve their full potential. To create this transformative change, NASSP has made it a priority to listen and learn from school leaders and the students they serve from around the nation and turn their wisdom into action. One avenue to accomplish this was our first ever survey of America's school leaders and high school students, released this past summer. As you know more than most, students and administrators are so rarely asked for their thoughts on education policy making. The survey highlights the perspectives of those who lead, teach, and learn in our schools every day. And for those who haven't been in a classroom since they graduated from high school, The results provide a better understanding of how students and school leaders are feeling about their roles, their schools, and their futures, as well as what they need to thrive. What we found was striking, but not surprising. Half of school leaders surveyed said their stress level is so high that they were considering a career change or retirement. The educator shortage is likely contributing to these stress levels, with 3 out of 4 school leaders agreeing that staffing shortages are a problem at their school. 1 out of 2 leaders are looking to leave the profession in the next 3 years, with 14% planning to leave in the next year and the 24% planning to leave in the next 2 to 3 years. And 3 out of 4 school leaders and students shared that they needed help with their mental or emotional health last year. These findings begin to paint a picture of the challenges and opportunities that you've all lived and that our schools and their leaders face nationwide. I encourage you to please check out the full findings at survey.nassp.org. And at NASSP, we will use these findings to direct our advocacy and programming efforts for the coming year. Recently, we launched a campaign led and designed by school leaders to address and tackle the retention crisis we're facing. Our hope is by engaging those in our schools, we can champion policies that build a sustainable pipeline that recruits, prepares, retains, and supports excellent school leaders and elevates the education profession. What's one such policy initiative? Expanding loan forgiveness. Right now, educators take on crippling debt that drives them from the work they love. And while educators can take advantage of loan forgiveness programs, they become ineligible when they move into the principalship. Because of this, we've been working with members of Congress on a solution that would not only expand existing loan forgiveness, but would also expand eligibility to school leaders. Senator Ben Ray Lujan recently introduced Senate Bill 4867, the Loan Forgiveness for Educators Act, with House companion HR 8856 by Representative Ledger Fernandez, which provides full student loan forgiveness to educators who teach for 5 years in high-need schools and will help staff the schools that need it most. And most importantly, the bill will now expand loan forgiveness to school leaders, so educators will no longer have to make the choice between advancing in their careers and thousands of dollars in loan repayments. This is the kind of incentive that we need more of, and I urge our audience to ask their legislators to please continue to support this critical solution to the educator shortage crisis. There's a whole lot more that I could talk about, but I'll leave that up to our experts and our speakers who can share more about how we can build a more equitable and excellent education system. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Silvia Martinez from the Office of Senator Ben Ray Lujan. We are grateful that she's able to join us this morning to share more details regarding the Loan Forgiveness for Educators Act. Silvia?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me and my boss to present to you about this wonderful bill. As a former teacher, I can just tell you how important a school leader is to developing a great workforce, great environment for children and for educators as well. So I'm really happy to have been part of this amazing bill that I'm about to present on. So I'm going to lower this a little bit. The Teacher Loan Forgiveness Program, or TLF, has not been significantly updated since 2004 to keep pace with rising debt levels and increasing educator shortages. Currently, to qualify up to $17,500 in loan forgiveness, which we all know is not enough, public school K-12 teachers must teach either mathematics or science at the secondary level or special education at the elementary or secondary level in a high-need school. To qualify for up to $5,000 in loan forgiveness, public school K-12 teachers must teach in a high-need school. There is no mention of early educators or school leaders, including principals, in the current TLF program. As a former teacher, I know that I had more than $5,000 in student debt. I was a 4th grade teacher, did not qualify for math or science at the secondary level. So this breakthrough piece of legislation would change that. Senator Lujan's bill will reform the TLF program so that more children have access to a diverse and well-prepared educator workforce, including early childhood educators and K-12 leaders, by expanding eligibility to early educator early childhood educators and leaders, K-12 principals and directors, providing complete loan forgiveness after 5 years of service, teaching or serving as a principal in early childhood education programs or in a high-need K-12 school, regardless of the subject that you are teaching, allowing service in pursuit of the TLF program to concurrently count toward public service loan forgiveness, ensuring that all federal loans qualify for forgiveness, including federal loans made before 1998 and federal direct plus loans, ensuring that educators retain loan repayment and forgiveness benefits if the status of their school changes. Educators are still able to make progress toward loan forgiveness if they have to take off for family medical leave, military service, or are impacted by a national emergency, and it's going to incentivize educators and principals to go into and continue serving in early education preparation programs and high-need public schools by having the federal government make educators monthly student loan payments during service and provide complete forgiveness at the end of their 5 years. Senator Lujan understands how important school leaders and teachers are to the education workforce and how they can round out and shape a child's life. So I'm really proud to be able to present on this Loan Forgiveness Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Sorry about that, y'all. I was saying hello to some friends here. Thank you, Sylvia. We're grateful to you and the senator for this great initiative, and it's really wonderful to have an educator working in the halls, working on stuff that matters to educators. So congratulations and thank you. Now it's my pleasure to turn things over to my new best friend, Dr. Leonard Pugliese. Len's from Newark, New Jersey, where he served as a teacher, vice principal, and principal. He now serves as the president of the American Federation of School Administrators, which is the AFL-CIO union that represents more than 20,000 principals, vice principals, and other school leaders and school districts across the United States, Puerto Rico, and the United States Virgin Islands. Prior to his election as AFSA president, Len served in various AFSA elected positions, including general vice president, secretary treasurer, and executive vice president. He also served as president and as executive director of the City Association of Supervisors and Administrators, or CASA, AFSA Local 20 in Newark, New Jersey. Len believes that quality public schools are essential to a functioning democratic society, and they can only exist when principal and other school leaders receive the tools and support they need to support their mission. Please join me in a warm welcome for Dr. Len Pugliese.
Well, good morning, all. Thank you and happy Principals Month to all the great school leaders that help make America's public schools exceptional places of learning. Thank you for your dedication, commitment, passion for public education and the children we serve. You are the heroes in our nation's public schools. Without your professional leadership, fostering a culture of learning, guiding instruction, engaging teachers and staff, and connecting with students, high-quality learning simply cannot happen, no matter how many standards or tests are mandated. I'm so very pleased to be here on behalf of the American Federation of School Administrators. I would like to thank the AFL-CIO for providing this venue. Earlier this year at the AFL-CIO convention, the Federation passed a policy resolution that stated, "Public education is how we help our children have a bright future. It is an economic necessity, an anchor of democracy, a moral imperative, and a fundamental civil right." The resolution praised public school staff for their heroic efforts during the pandemic and called for necessary resources and adequate staff and supports to continue to meet children's educational, mental health, and social emotional needs, a big part of our discussion today. I would like to thank AFSA's close partners, the National Association of Secondary School Principals and the National Association of Elementary School Principals. These teammates recognize the need to spotlight our critical issues that are raising big concerns to school leaders nationwide because of the serious impact they are having on our students. Schools are built around routines, and those routines have been disrupted, just like societal routines have been disrupted. Only in our schools, societal disruption is intensified, compressed, if you will. And now we have reached the breaking point, with learning loss an issue, with student and staff wellness an issue, with retention and recruitment of principals and other school staff an issue. However, we should realize that many of these issues are not just a pandemic-induced phenomenon. The issue of principal turnover has been a concern prior to the onset of COVID, especially in economically disadvantaged communities. COVID has shed a spotlight on the principal shortage, and we know we must address these concerns head-on, standing together with our partner organizations for the good of all students throughout the nation. We believe that this is not a discussion to be had just during Principals Month, to be forgotten after we leave today. These issues must be addressed every month, indeed, every day, and today is the real beginning of that journey. AFSA has been working hard to mobilize our voices. It is time for principals and school leaders to go out and aggressively tell our stories. We need to share what we see every day in our schools and teach lessons based on our experience and expertise leading schools. We must object to the so-called reformers who have never spent much time in schools, yet try to tell us how to do our jobs as they sit on the sidelines. Nobody knows schools and students like us, and our voices must be heard. One person who understands this and is with us today is the Assistant U.S. Secretary of Education for Planning, Evaluation, and Policy Development, Roberto Rodriguez. He is the son of public school educators. President Biden nominated Mr. Rodriguez to this position, and the Senate confirmed him on a bipartisan vote. Mr. Rodriguez is a career-long policy leader with expertise and lifelong commitment to advancing educational equity and opportunity. His service includes working on the White House Domestic Policy Council during the Obama administration and in the U.S. Senate for the late U.S. Senator Edward Kennedy. Over the past 2 decades, Mr. Rodriguez has played a key role in virtually every major K-12 education policy effort and legislative reform at the national level. His current portfolio is a broad one, encompassing everything from putting together the department's budget priorities to advancing its policy goals in the K-12 and higher education space. Before joining the administration's transition team, Mr. Rodriguez served as the president and CEO of Teach Plus, a national nonprofit organization dedicated to elevating teacher leadership and educational equity. Please join me in welcoming Roberto Rodriguez, Assistant U.S. Secretary of Education for Planning, Evaluation, and Policy Development.
Thank you so much, Len, for that really generous introduction. Good morning. It's great to see you all. I am so thrilled to be here. I want to begin by thanking Len and Ron and Earl for their voices here in Washington, D.C., carrying forth the vision of our principals and school leaders. We are so grateful to AFSCA, to NAESP, and to NASSP for all of that work. I want to thank our champions for public education, for our educators, and for our principals on the Hill. I'm just honored to be here and joined by Representative Jamie Raskin, who you'll hear from shortly. He's been such a champion for public education. Thank you for the wonderful remarks, Sylvia, and for your leadership in terms of Senator Lujan's work to help expand and support public service loan forgiveness for more of our principals. We appreciate you. And let me just express my enthusiasm for being able to lend my voice to saying Happy National Principals Month to all of you. Leadership matters greatly. You know, and as you heard Ron say, from the pandemic to thinking about how we really promote greater pathways for opportunity for our students. It's how we move agendas. It's how we deliver resources. It's how we really bring people together to make change. And principals are leaders of our school communities. They are the force for that change. So if you think about a single child's journey through elementary school, the evidence shows that a talented, experienced, great principal can make all the difference, almost a full school year's worth of difference in student learning. And this impact expands beyond the walls of any single classroom or beyond the impact on any single student. Because of your role as school leaders, the success of an effective principal impacts the totality of schools, multitude of families, the totality of our school staff, the communities in which they lead and contribute every day. So I am so honored to be part of the Biden administration in really supporting that charge and celebrating you and the tremendous accomplishment and contribution that our principals make in the field of education. The job of being a principal is a challenge on a good day. And in a moment that we're in today, with all of these outside factors, from pandemic to the politics and many more, we know that job is even more difficult today. The compounding effects that the past 26 months have brought forth through the COVID pandemic, what I often refer to as the great disruption in our American public education system, navigating that impact on learning loss, navigating that impact on the teacher shortage, navigating that impact on the social and emotional and mental health needs of our young people and of our teachers and our school staff can be daunting. We are committed in the Biden administration to being a full partner alongside our principals in that charge. It is why the president has fought so hard to deliver $130 billion alongside his allies in Congress to support the American Rescue Plan, to support those recovery efforts across our country. It is why we're working so hard to make sure that we're helping our principals put those dollars to work each and every day to make a difference in the lives of young people. And we are working hard to make sure that as you spend down those dollars, you have the support and the guidance from our Department of Education to make that difference. We've hosted a multitude of webinars. We've been around the country, have put forth 3 handbooks that really support evidence-based practice in partnership with our school leaders, with our educators, and with our school leaders. And we are working hard just recently to make sure that our schools have the guidance that they need as they spend that down on those CARES Act, the ESSA 1 dollars, on the GEAR dollars, to be able to have additional time for late liquidation for those dollars through April 1 of 2024. As Earl mentioned, you all have felt the effect of the worsening educator shortage. It's impacted almost every state, particularly acute in our underserved communities, but knows no boundaries, right? I think we're seeing this in our urban districts, in our rural districts, in our suburban districts, across a multitude of subject matters, not just STEM, not just bilingual education or special education, as we know we've had shortages there. We are committed to being a full partner in helping to bridge that shortage. And at the department, we're working across agencies with our colleagues at the Department of Labor, with our colleagues at the Department of Treasury to elevate flexibilities, elevate dollars and opportunities to address the teacher shortage. Much of the conversation's been around this teacher shortage, but you all know so well that the real solution here is not just about responding to the immediacy of the need, although that is an urgent need we need to respond to today. But the real solution is a more comprehensive approach to strengthening, supporting, and building a thriving teaching profession. And we've issued extensive guidance at the department on how our ARP dollars and other federal resources can be used to stabilize the profession and to turn the corner to really galvanize a new vision for how we support a diverse and thriving and talented teaching profession. That means making sure that we have access to, that our new teachers have access to affordable, high-quality pathways into the profession, such as teacher residencies and grow your own programs, and effective teacher preparation programs, apprenticeship programs. We've been doing new work with the Department of Labor to open up those pathways into the profession. We'll continue to call on states and districts and institutions of higher education to utilize those ARP dollars to increase compensation for our teachers and to invest in those teacher pipeline programs to hire more professionals across our education workforce. We also know that those shortages aren't just limited to our teachers. As has already been mentioned this morning, they extend to our school leaders as well. And turnover of our principals has been an issue even before the pandemic. You know, according to a recent report, the average district loses anywhere from 15 to 30% of principals each year, although over the past few years that has been ticking up. And as Ron mentioned in the NASSP recent survey, we know that 1 out of 2 school leaders say their stress level is so high they're considering retirement. Right? 73% of our school principals report needing help with mental or emotional health this past year, in large part as a result of this pandemic. So we need to make that a national priority. Responding to those trends needs to be a clarion call for us collectively at the federal level, at the state level, at the district level, to prioritize, to support, and to uplift our principals, to give them the support that they need, and to renew and rejuvenate the profession for those that are to come behind. We've put a set of investments in motion at the U.S. Department of Education around supporting our teachers and our principals, including, you know, over 22 grants for our new SEED program to support the teacher pipeline, teacher quality partnership grants, so nearly $25 million to prepare, develop, and retain a strong and diverse teaching workforce. For the first time ever, we're putting forth dollars thanks to our champions in Congress who've made that available for the Augustus Hawkins program to open pathways into the education profession at our HBCUs and our HSIs and our MSIs. And our administration will continue to prioritize that moving forward. Another bright spot here has been, already as mentioned, the action to reduce the debt for teachers. We can't afford to let student debt be a barrier to entry into this profession. And we inherited a broken public service loan forgiveness program that our department has been working to fix and improve and approve. More than $13 billion in forgiveness for more than 211,000 public servants since we've taken office through that program. We've created a new waiver. I have to plug this and ask you all, for those of you working with your teachers and with others in public service and public service, to take advantage now to benefit from that waiver. Individuals have until the end of October to apply for that. So get those applications in. You can find those applications at ed.gov. You know more than most the toll that this pandemic took on disrupting student learning. That's already been mentioned this morning. And it brings me to highlight a second core focus of our work at the department, which has been to double down on the academic recovery and on the acceleration and growth of learning and support for our students. We are engaged in an all-hands-on-deck effort here to recover the lost instructional time that we know we still have to do work on stemming from this pandemic. We're keeping standards and expectations high for student achievement. That means focusing on acceleration and not focusing on remediation. But we're seeing states move forward and districts and our school leaders move forward in encouraging ways to address this. You know, putting new interventions into play around academic achievement, after school and summer learning, doing more to support student enrichment, supporting mentors and school counselors and mental health services, and more intensive evidence-based tutoring for our students, more supports that we know are critical for our students' success. And we're going to continue to support and chronicle those examples at the department, lift up those bright spots, support our leaders across the country in undertaking those. We know that 56% of our schools are utilizing academic recovery and tutoring to support and turn the tide on this pandemic. 73% using summer learning and enrichment programs. So these strategies and tactics are already at play and in play as part of the ARP. And earlier this year, just there at the White House, we were proud to announce and launch the National Partnership for Student Success, which is a response to President Biden's call to recruit, train, and support 250,000 additional adults that can make a difference in the lives and learning and progress of our young people in schools. A third core priority of our administration is to continue to support our students' holistic development, their physical, social, emotional, and mental health needs. And we know student wellness and school success go hand in hand. I think we're at a unique time in our country where our parents and our communities understand the importance of this is not an either-or equation for our young people. We need to make sure their relationships drive their learning. The relationships and their well-being drives their learning. So what can we do to really step up our charge, especially in the face of a national youth mental health crisis, as our Surgeon General often notes? We know that our young people are 6 times more likely to access the mental health services they need if they're delivered in our schools. So that means we have to work together to make mental health a permanent part of our school's DNA. We have to do more to make sure that those school psychologists and social workers and counselors and mental health professionals are available to build and cultivate and support those relationships that our young people need to be healthy, to be supported, to be successful in school. That is precisely the president's goal. He called for doubling the number of our school-based health professionals in our schools. And working hard in Congress, we're able to put into place now and put into action the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act that will help bring that into focus. We've put out over $300 million just this past month in a call for proposals to support building the pipeline for our mental health professionals. And in the coming weeks, we'll be doing more to allocate the $1 billion that's been released to states through our Stronger Connections grants to support safe and healthy schools, positive school climates, as well as $50 million to further augment and support our 21st Century Community Learning Program, our after-school programs. And then finally, let me just mention one last priority, which is to really seize the opportunity coming out of this pandemic to reimagine our schools, to redesign student learning, to support and scale innovations to teaching and learning that we know will help to engage and connect our students to the rigorous and relevant content and experiences that they need to prepare for their future. You know, before I joined the administration and was working closely with many of my teacher leaders across the country at Teach Plus, in the heart of this pandemic, right? You know, they all went home thinking they'd be back in the classroom, you know, in a week or two. As we were navigating that, and they were doubling down on connections to students, learning more about their parents and their students' families, working to stay connected to their principals and to their other peers and colleagues in their schools. Many of them said to me, I don't want to go back to March of 2020. I want to re-envision. I want to learn from this experience. I want to be at the forefront of generating new ideas and approaches and scaling those approaches to really redesign our schools so that they're worthy of our students' greatest ambitions. So we need to be a partner in harnessing those best ideas and approaches. We need to be a partner in making sure we're providing those project-based and hands-on learning experiences in the real world, our competency-based approaches for student learning. We need to think about stronger pathways to and through higher education and careers and communities. We should be providing every student and their families those connections, that support for career and for college navigation earlier, that advising that we know is needed, that support to take that agency that they need to be able to support their future and drive their future path. So through that reimagination, we believe every high school student will be able to graduate with college, career, and community-based experiences and credit. And that's as well as a vision for their future and a clear path for how to get there. And we think that we can get that done together, right, with these new investments and by building on the investments in our system through ARP. So, you know, so much of a multitude of needs out there. Those academic and acceleration and learning recovery needs, those social and emotional needs, those needs around supporting our educators, meeting that teacher shortage gap, responding to that, and those opportunities to re-envision and support a new definition of what student engagement and learning can look like for their future. Our principals are at the forefront of that. And I just want to thank you for your commitment each and every day for living the value of supporting our young people and helping them get ahead in all that you do. Thank you for informing our policy conversations here in Washington, D.C. It is your best ideas. It is your vision from across the country in each and every one of their schools that will drive this ahead. And we here at the Department of Education, and Secretary Cardona says it all the time, we are that service agency to support you in full partnership toward that end. And in every step of the way, we've got your back. So thank you all very much, and look forward to continued work and partnership toward that success. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to Len.
Hi, good morning. I'm Denise Duberville, and I'm an assistant editor at Education Week, where I cover principals and school leadership. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to introduce today's panel. We have Congressman Jamie Raskin, who represents Maryland's 8th Congressional District. Thank you so much for joining us. We also have with us Sue Danielson, the principal of Rosa Parks Elementary School in Woodbridge, Virginia. I am going to stand because I'm too far back, sorry. Robert Motley, the principal of Atherton High School in Columbia, Maryland, and Edward Cosentino, the principal of Clemens Crossing Elementary School in Columbia, Maryland, and also right next to me, Sam Buckley, the assistant principal in Pikesville High School in Baltimore, Maryland. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. Welcome. We are going to have a discussion that's going to be about 45 minutes. We'll leave about 15 minutes at the end for questioning. If you are watching online, you can also submit questions, and we will also take those. So you heard a lot today in the introduction about principals' mental health, and there was, oh, louder? I'm sorry. Sorry, I'm wearing a mask. Is everyone hearing me? Okay, awesome. Thank you, sorry about that. We heard a lot this morning about principals' mental health and well-being in schools. And is it still okay? Okay, awesome, sorry about that. I just wanted to start off by asking some of the principals here, just how are you doing? How are your students doing? And how are your teachers doing? We have a RAND survey from earlier this year that about 85% of principals reported experiencing job-related stress. That's higher than the other working adults in this country. Only about 35% of them reported that. About 28% reported symptoms of depression. Those are really sobering numbers. And so again, before we kick it off, I just want to ask, how are you? How are your students? How are your teachers? Sue, do you mind starting us off?
Sure. So my name is Sue Danielson, and I'm a principal in Woodbridge, Virginia, Rosa Parks Elementary. And I think that one of the things that we've seen a lot is with our students is a lot of separation anxiety. They were so sheltered for many years being home. They had their parents around them. So separating and coming into an environment now where they have 25 and 27 kids in a classroom, learning all those boundaries that they have to adhere to, the high expectations of learning. A lot of kids didn't go to preschool, so that has impacted their learning. And our teachers are so dedicated to making sure that each child is reached each day, that the responsibility that they feel for student learning is so great. So it's a matter of putting pressures on themselves and not being able to have that balance. And then, of course, we love the funding that's coming our way, but the new initiatives adds to the stress of teachers implementing so many new initiatives and knowing that they've got to move kids so far, so fast.
Robert, do you mind talking to us a little bit about what you're seeing in your school and how your life has changed during the pandemic as a school leader?
I don't think we have enough time for that, to be quite honest with you, but I'll try my best.
Go on, I'll cut you off.
First of all, thank you for asking how we're doing. I don't think, as principals, we are the ones that are responsible for the social and emotional health of our students and of our staff. And not many people ask us how we're doing. So I really appreciate you prefacing your question with that. My role as principal of Atherton High School, I have a dual role because I also serve as the president of our administrators union. And so I represent principals' voice across our district in Howard County. And our principals are doing better. During the pandemic, it was tough for us, with the contact tracing and just making sure that our staff and students were taken care of. And so I think as we sort of return to a sense of normalcy, that things are getting better. You asked about my school in particular. I know that my kids are excited about us returning to some sense of normalcy. They are excited about homecoming that's going to be indoors and not outside on the football field, right? They're excited about our pep rally that's going to be in the gym, So there are things that we're returning to a sense of normalcy that the kids are excited about, but we're still struggling with, getting back to that normalcy and what that looks like and helping them to realize coming back to school and getting back into the routine of things and making sure that they understand what those expectations are. So we are slowly but surely returning to some sense of normalcy, but it's been a long road for both students, both for all students, staff, and for administrators as well. But thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Hi, I'm Ed Cosentino, principal of Clemens Crossing Elementary School in Columbia, Maryland. Relatively speaking, I think about a year ago right now, where we barely had any students, if any, vaccinated, and everybody had to wear a mask. And the weather's changing, and we were getting ready to shut classes down because, the seasonal change exacerbated the situation. So a year ago, I'll be honest, I would come home and my wife would be like, "Ooh, you're in a mood." And I said out loud, probably for the first time in my career, I hate my job. And I'm typical happy, Robert knows me, happy-go-lucky, smile on my face. Glass is not only half full, it's always overflowing. And it hit me, and I kind of got to the point where I had to say, I'm turning off notifications, I'm putting my work cell phone down, I'm not opening up my laptop, and I set up some pretty big boundaries to get beyond that. Luckily, a year later here, I feel like there's that sense of normalcy. I feel like I'm back to normal so that I can lead my school even better. I feel that I'm far more positive, and I love my job. And I love my school. I do see a big change with our students. Our students have come in, data tells a story. I'm very close with our school counselor, and she comes in regularly with SIPs, suicide intervention plans. So if a child says, I hate myself, I want to kill myself, we have to address it. Everybody knows those processes and procedures. That has quadrupled in my school. We might have had 6 to 10 in a year, if that, and now we're up in the 30s last year. So we kind of got it's concerning, the well-being of our students. So I think one of my main goals over the last year and a half is to go slow to go fast, and not put too much pressure on staff, but know that we do still need to have results and get to a certain point, and that I care for them and love them and want them to do the very best and reach and work hard. And I think we are in a much, much better spot because of all of the support around us. So, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing.
All right. Good morning, everyone. So I am Samuel Buckley, assistant principal at Pikesville High School, located in Baltimore County Public Schools. Kind of similar views as the rest of my panelists. One thing that I tried to do is make sure that my teachers are okay. And every morning I would come in and I would check on their well-being. I think that one of the things is, we always talk about, the teachers offering grace and empathy to our students, but what about us offering grace and empathy to our teachers? So that's one of the things that, I tried to do a lot at my particular school. And, one other thing is that, we all come to work with our own personal issues going on at home. And, as administrators, we have to play that counselor role for our teachers and for our students. And one thing that I always say is that you have to address the Maslow's hierarchy before you address, the educational part. And that's one thing that, that empathy and adding that grace and things like that, because for me, I see people as people. And if I'm taking care of my staff, they're gonna, collectively, we're gonna take care of and service the needs of the students. So that's one of the things I think as an administrator, we have to offer that grace and empathy during the pandemic.
Thank you so much, Sam. Both of you and Ed touched on something that I wanted to ask you to follow up on. What kinds of support programs do you have for students, for teachers, and for principals in your schools?
Well, I'm very pleased. We have many schools have structured student support teams, instructional support teams. Recently, we have the implementation of school-based mental health services, and that I feel that 20 years ago when I started being, as an administrator, we had a half-time school counselor. Now we have 1.5. I feel like we were looked at as somebody who had to have the magic wand in the front office, and now I feel like we have a wide range of services and supports that are starting to be implemented and put into place. So mental health supports from outside coming into our school, more school counselors, a full-time school psychologist. So I'm hoping that part of that is because of the increase in funding. I know that is the case in our local district, which Robert and I are going to share with our Board of Education the positive impact of that. I'm sure some of the funding came from ARP and both federal and state levels. But I feel like at this point I feel personally I'm starting to get the resources needed to really help and support our students.
Often the support is geared towards students, and I feel like pre-pandemic, when we were talking about mental health, it was often about students and sometimes about teachers. And in reporting over the last few years, it seems like it's going up to the school leader level. So Indianapolis has, arranged for therapy for adults in the system, and I'm just curious whether any of your systems have targeted programs for principals themselves. Who's taking care of the principals? Oh, I didn't.
Therein lies the problem, right? And so, and that's where our advocacy and voice needs to come into play a little bit more, I think. And looking at places like Indianapolis that are doing those innovative things and saying, how can we replicate that and put that into place for school leaders across the country, right? Because, as I mentioned earlier, we are the ones that shoulder that weight for our staff and for our students, making sure that their emotional health and well-being is in a good place. But then, what about us? And who's looking after us? And so I think that's, that's where we're missing that piece of the puzzle. And so engaging in these conversations like we are today, and then making it publicly known to everyone that we as principals also need that social emotional support is a step in the right direction.
And for me personally, I feel like I've been doing this job for a long time. The thing that I'm worried about is the sustainability. I see a lot of younger principals. I think we've had that 30% turnover since March 2020. And so we have a lot of younger, new principals on board. And I've seen some of them, people that I'd never, you have a blink image of somebody who's very positive, and I've seen that side that isn't as positive, that's more stressed out. So I get worried about those newer principals. I feel like because they started during the pandemic, and so I really hope that we can provide that type of support for them so that they don't burn out. I've had the luxury of having 7, 8 years prior to the pandemic to know what normal looks like and how to get back to that, but I'm worried about those new folks especially.
In Prince William County, we do have a mentoring program for new principals where they are paired up with another veteran principal. And so, but it is principals taking care of principals. So there's not outside folks taking care of us, it's us taking care of us because we know the importance of supporting one another. And NASB has done a great job of putting forth webinars and some things for us as principals to tap into other principals across the nation who are really big in telling us as principals to slow down and self-care isn't selfish. And I think that's a really important note for us to go with. One other thing I was going to say earlier when we're talking about kids and teachers and principals, we also have a parent piece in there too. And I think educating our parents, reaching out to our parents because they're struggling too with their children at home and providing a parent liaison in schools so that you have an extra ear for parents in schools, I think is really important. We were fortunate to get one this year, and the difference she has made just in a few months, making our parents know that she's there to help them and providing resources for our parents, takes that responsibility off maybe a counselor, so the counselor can focus on kids, the parent liaison can focus on the parent piece. So that's another huge piece we can't leave out because they're the keepers of our kids first. They're their first teachers.
Thank you, Sue. Congressman Raskin, you have been incredibly open about the loss of your son, Thomas, in 2020. I just first want to say I'm just really sorry for your loss, and thank you for joining us here today. You've been open about his struggles with depression, and I'm curious about whether you can share with us how that experience has shaped your understanding about the mental health struggles that young adults are facing in this country, whether as a country we're doing enough to explore and investigate the problem and come up with solutions.
Well, thank you for your kind words. There we go. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with all these great principals from Maryland and Virginia. We're obviously living in a time of great stress and anxiety and trauma for a lot of people. I mean, we've lost more than 1 million Americans to COVID-19, hundreds of thousands in the opioid crisis. The Surgeon General tells us what everybody on the panel knows, which is that we are in a nationwide emergency of a mental and emotional health crisis for young people. And there's no reason to think it's going away anytime soon. I mean, what's on the minds of young people? What was so much on the mind of Tommy? Well, climate change, which they feel in a very deep, profound way, COVID-19, the political polarization and hostility and negativism in the country. Those things are, well, we've got the best chance, I think, of getting rid of COVID-19 of those. But basically, it's going to continue to be a very stressful time for young people. And so I appreciate the attention that educators are paying to the problem. And we really need to move to a situation where mental and emotional health care are built into the school systems and are right there from a very young age, because we're not just talking about young people in their 20s now, we're talking about high school, middle school, elementary school, where kids are showing symptoms of depression, anxiety, and other kinds of mental and emotional health disorders. So, the role of the principal, I was just reflecting, seems to me to be more important than ever, precisely because there's so many more burdens and stresses on young people and on teachers who are also, young teachers who are coming in. I wish I could say that politicians offered better role models as leaders, but, obviously we've been falling down on the job a little bit, and people can't always look to, people running for high office as moral exemplars or people that you would want to use as role models for kids. And so the role of the principal strikes me as ever more important to catalyze kids' positive understanding of what it means to be part of a community.
Thank you so much. Sue, were you adding something? So you're nodding. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Congressman, for answering. I appreciate it. I'm going to stick with you, if that's okay.
All right. I may have exhausted my knowledge of the subject, but okay.
No, I wanted to follow up. Well, not a follow up, but switching to another topic that everyone sort of talked about this morning, which is the connection between student loan debt and who enters the profession, who stays in the profession. And, this morning we woke up, well, yesterday actually, we got some news on what President Biden's debt forgiveness plan would look like for for a student loan debt forgiveness plan. And I believe sometime today or this week, there would be a ruling on whether there's a temporary halt because there are some legal challenges. I wondered if you could speak a little bit about two things that folks have talked about. One, about a request by a number of people to extend the October 31st deadline for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. And two, there's been some criticism about whether the debt forgiveness plan goes far enough to alleviate the debt burden on people, particularly, including, educators who have heavy debt burden.
So, I see a lot of this through the prism of the experience of our youngest daughter, who went in to Teach for America, was teaching in Philadelphia, and saw the staggering emotional and psychological, as well as pedagogical responsibilities she had, and also stresses she had. I mean, she had kids whose parents or grandparents were gravely ill with COVID-19. She had 2 different students who got shot. She went to see one of them at the hospital. It was the first time she even met him, because they'd always been on Zoom. The first time she met him was in the hospital, where he suffered from 2 gunshot wounds. She had students get pregnant. It's overwhelming. So that's a burden that the teachers have taken on and the principals have taken on to deal with those kinds of things. But so there's not that much that the rest of us can do about it. But one thing we definitely can do is to help relieve the burden financially of young people who've made this commitment to go and teach, oftentimes under very difficult arduous circumstances, we can ease the burden somewhat by paying them back. I can think of a handful of other professions that make sense as well, that would be kind of in that core nature, but teachers are like first responders for things that are going on in the society. So we got to do that. Obviously, the loan forgiveness should not be tied to what subject you're teaching, especially if we're trying to train people for democratic participation and citizenship. If we limit it to math and science, it seems like you're discouraging people from going into teaching history and social studies and English and the other subjects that don't fall within those favorite categories. So we got to get rid of that. But I also understand that we have the problem of even the limited categorical loan forgiveness programs we've got for teachers stop if you become a principal. Or you go into administration, but we need people in those jobs. I mean, I know that the public image is of bloated educational bureaucracies, but that's just way out of date. I mean, we have very slimmed down functional educational systems, but we got to get people to go into them, and you want people who've had the experience of teaching to do it, and so why would we create any kind of chilling effect or discouragement of it? So I definitely favor the, broadening it or deepening the program to include not just teachers, but educators and people who've gone through teaching and are now helping to run the schools. Because those are real jobs and we need people doing them.
Edward, were you going to add?
I kind of want to add something on that. I think as we're trying to reimagine education overall, one thing that, throwing out an idea, we have these great innovative pathways for careers, if not college, in high school and beyond. What about, I think one thing that we're not tapping in this educational teacher shortage is being able to identify kids in high school and getting them into the profession early on and having almost a pathway in every high school for a teaching career right then and there. And what kind of credentials do you need? Obviously, you need all the diploma-bound credentials to get into those colleges, but really fine-tune and hone in on tapping young kids in high school for that innovative pathway into teaching. And I'd love to be able to design that. I mean, with Mr. Motley next door.
So Ed, we do have a teaching academy in my school.
All right. Well,
but the problem is that I have 8 kids in it.
Right.
And so
how can we tap that further?
Exactly. And that's it. We partnered with our community college, and we have a program that they get accreditation as they come out, and they're able to go into
future teachers from Athleton. They send kids to my school to help tutor, and then we haven't been able to. We need to start that back up. But
they can come to Prince William County too. Don't just say your school. They can send them my way too.
Yeah, we need to replicate that all over, and that can be it's not new, but it could be replicated all over. And because by the time they get to college, they're going towards engineering or they're going towards medicine and lawyer or whatever. So we need to tap that early.
So just wanted to chime in really quick. So I had the opportunity to, I've been an administrator in Baltimore City Schools, which is urban school district, Carroll County Schools, which is rural, and now I'm in Baltimore County.
All over the place.
Yeah. So, but it's given me a great lens on education, right? And in Carroll County, they had the TAM program where they took high school students and they actually gave them open contracts. So when they graduate from an undergrad university, then they'll be able to come back to Carroll County and things like that. One thing that I was going to say is, one of the big issues is the teacher pipeline. But another issue is kind of the retainment of teachers. And I think when we talk about equity and things like that, like 2% of the educators in this country are African American males, right? And the thing is, so when we look at partnering with universities and things like that, like we have to incentivize and we have to glamorize education. Like it has to be cool to be a teacher, because if you look around this room, everyone in here was impacted by a teacher, you know? So I think that's one of the biggest things. At my particular school, every school I've worked at, I've partnered with the local HBCUs and things like this, because we need to diversify our educator pool. Like it's something that's said to, you know, have a teacher of color sitting in front of students of color. I mean, you know, it's just something said about that. And I think getting back to the previous question about mental health, I think school leaders, we are under the gun as far as, you know, we still have to meet the standardized tests, you know, scores and things like that. Graduation rates still have to be up. And all of this is being done while, you know, we were in a pandemic and things like that. And no one has ever taught in a pandemic. So me, as a school leader, I'm trying to tell a teacher how to teach in a pandemic, and I've never taught in a pandemic. You know, so all those mental health aspects and other things that we can't control comes into play. When parents send students to us, they send us their best. It's their best. And we have to meet the needs of those students. You know, we have to play counselor. You know, sometimes, you know, I'm looking at, in the pandemic, you know, the digital divide, you know, students that lived far out and they didn't get broadband, you know, and me as a school leader, I'm delivering hotspots, you know, so think about those type things, you know, that we had to deal with in the pandemic. But as far as the recruitment aspect, I think incentivizing, you know, some of these universities so we can create a pipeline of 21st century educators is great.
Thanks, Sam. You also talked about principals never having taught in a pandemic, having to teach teachers in a pandemic. Are you also suggesting that prep programs should change?
I think if in 2022, if you look at education, the way we reach students, it has to be different. It has to be innovative. It has to be hands-on. We have to utilize like what they like, whether it's social media, technology, whatever the case may be. We have to meet them where they are and you know, give them the content, but also be able to assess them in multiple ways. You know, so I think gone are the days where you have a teacher in the front and, you know, they're lecturing as if it's a college seminar. Like, you can't do that anymore. A lot of our students, you know, they need to move around. We want them to be independent thinkers because obviously we want them to get what they've learned and then to be able to create and things like analyze and things like that, because they have to be prepared for the 21st century. This is what employers are looking for.
I just want to highlight, I mean, it's National Principals Month, right? And so, there's a lot of talk about teacher shortages and what's happening, but I don't know many people realize that principals come from teachers, right? And so if we don't address that, it's going to impact the leadership of our schools. And as someone, I mean, I'm in my 29th year, and next year I am up for retirement. And I'm concerned about who's going to step into my shoes when I leave my building. Dr. Maturano, I'm not going anywhere just yet, just to understand. That's my superintendent, by the way. But it's concern that we have this void. And to be honest with you, I have 3 assistant principals. And I talk to them, and I'm like, no, Robert, we don't want your job. I'm happy right where I am. And so the larger question is, why is it that people view this position, the principalship, as something that they don't want to step into? And that's a larger question, because do they see that there's no mental health supports? Do they see that everything's dumped on you? Do they see that you have to deal with the politics, you know, where, you know, when you have masks, you know, wearing in your schools and parents are calling you and yelling at you that you're forcing their kid to wear a mask? Like, they see all of this and they're like, I don't want to deal with that. And so how do we change the vision or what people are seeing about the principalship to a point where it's something that they want to do and aspire to be. Because as it stands right now, that is not the case. And so having this discussion today is certainly helping us to shed light on what's wrong and what's not happening. But I also want to say, and I apologize for monopolizing a little bit, but we have 3 organizations here today: the National Association of Elementary School Principals, National Association of Secondary School Principals, and the American Federation of School Administrators, who have come together because they also realize that this needs to be addressed and discussed and put out in the open. Historically, the NAESP and NASSP have really dealt with, professional learning and how do we help our leaders be more effective in the schools, and AFSA dealt with working conditions. But we now realize that we've got to come together because the working conditions impact your effectiveness in the schools. And so to have these 3 organizations represented today working together for principals, for school administrators is huge. And I don't want that to be lost in us participating in this panel today, because I am thrilled to see all 3 organizations together. And having served as past president of the National Association of Secondary School Principals and now serving as a general vice president for AFSA, I see both sides of that coin and how important they are and how they have to go together. So I just want to bring that to the forefront to say we've got to work together to figure out how we can get people wanting to be principals, because it is a fantastic job and so rewarding. I love it. I've been doing it for 16 years, and there's no other job that's better. I really do believe that.
Okay. Well, as people sitting in the principal's office, I'd love to hear some of your ideas on how do you make the principalship more attractive?
Show that you can do it with balance, with support. I love my involvement with NAESP because I see that I don't have to recreate the wheel. I have people in Virginia I can pick up the phone and call. I have people in North Dakota I can pick up the phone and call, all over the country. And we're dealing with very similar situations, and I think the support is there. And I think if people see that they're not alone, it is a lonely job, but if they're not alone, and figuring out ways, like we give feedback in our administrators meeting every month, and I didn't fill it out from yesterday, but every month I put, we need more time to collaborate. We need principal to principal time to collaborate, because we need the veteran principals helping out the new principals, and vice versa. The new principals have that energy and innovation, and they help us out. So I think those type of things, try to figure out ways to make it easier, and by collaborating and networking, you can make it much easier so that you're not alone doing it by yourself. So.
I think you have to ask for help. It is a lonely job, but I think you can't be afraid that if I ask for help, that's a black mark against me because I can't deal with this by myself. I think you have to be able to say, let me call Ed and talk to Ed. Let me reach out to NASP and see, is there an organization of webinars or something I can do? And I think we have to talk to our superintendents. I think we have to tell our superintendents that our principals want more time together. And hopefully our superintendents will listen to the fact that principals do need more time. You do want that sense of belonging. That's human nature. We all want to belong, but not at the cost of, people losing their inability to be a human, because we're still human beings. And the sustainability that Ed talked about earlier, that has been difficult. It's been difficult to sustain. So we have to be strong. I mean, I agree with this man sitting right next to me. I have the best job in the world. I get to work with kids every day, and that is a humbling experience, and I love my job. And I want to continue to do my job, but I know that it's going to take support. It's going to take support from my communities, from my superintendents, and just everybody just embracing each other.
Thank you, Sue. And thank you, Robert, for bringing that up. I really appreciate it. I don't mean to get stuck in the challenges, but I'm going to ask you about something that's been in the news a lot about, again, about the staffing shortages, particularly teachers. But, if you look at the news, you'd see, in San Antonio the other day, kids were helping, clean up the room because there were not enough custodians. So I wanted to ask you, what does the staffing shortage look like in your school districts this year? And, what are the challenges with that? Is that part of what are the challenges with the staffing shortages this year? What are you seeing in your district? Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
So in Baltimore County at Pikesville High School, we had about 7 vacancies this year, and they were all actually filled back in April. Luckily, like I said, I have a lot of partnerships with some of the local colleges, so I was able to fill a lot of the positions. And we had some really, really great applicants, and to be honest with you, I was able to send some of those great applicants to other schools in my districts as well, because this is a shared responsibility, as administrators. One of the things we did in Baltimore County with the Grow Your Own program is teacher, paraprofessionals and things like that support teachers that also have degrees. We actually place them in the classrooms because they're already really doing the work already. So we were able to combat some of the shortages that way. And also there's ongoing job fairs as we speak, so it's an ongoing thing, but also having some college and career fairs, going to local universities, setting up tables there. And like I said, we really need to push this campaign of making education cool. You look at some of the other professions, whether it's engineering or business management or whatever the case may be, and it's a big push for that. But I think education is literally the foundation and the root of society. So we have to get back to making education look cool.
So this is an area where I realize that we are very fortunate in the district that we are, that we really don't, well, I, at least at my school, didn't have any sort of, I began the year with 1 vacancy open, and I was able to fill it within the first week of school, and it was for a Spanish position. But I did have a hard time filling. I have something called a Hispanic liaison position where I have a high enough Spanish-speaking population that they hire someone to come in and support those students. And so I just filled that position about a week ago. But again, that's another stressor for my colleagues, right? Is starting the year with 7 vacancies, and you've got substitutes in your building, and finding people to be able to deliver quality instruction for those students. And so that's another stressor that we have as leaders of our building, in managing that void of teachers, that you have to now figure out what's going to happen as you're getting emails from parents complaining that my child doesn't have a teacher in the classroom. So again, that sheds light on another issue that we deal with as leaders of our buildings.
I think in Howard County, Maryland, and we're the same district, I believe we had 600 new teachers this year. At the beginning of the year, we started with 70 vacancies county-wide for every position out there. And I told our chief human resource officer that we've always hired and had pretty much been fully staffed on day one. And I said, you've worked really hard. They've done a great job, but you get judged on the last 5% that you're not hired. And it's too bad because it was a banner year for hiring folks. I don't know if that's sustainable because for year after year to hire at that rate. At my school, we have this, and unfortunately the economy is, fortunately the economy is great, but I've always seen that cycle of when there's low unemployment, which there is right now, we have a much harder time finding people for all those supplemental positions. And that's where we are right now. It is incredibly hard to find all of the close adult supervision positions to help support special education students. Kids that are the most vulnerable, that need the most support, that need to catch up as much, that have very individualized plans. It's a struggle to find staff for that. Luckily, we were fully staffed with all of our certified folks, but classified folks, we had a very hard time filling those positions.
So let's continue to tear down the curtain, shall we? So I had this summer, as I was interviewing for positions, I thought I was done. I had, put in my offer for, let's say, 3 of my positions. And it then went to HR for processing. And HR got back to me and said, nope, they declined because of the salary. And so when we talk about making the profession attractive, we have to look at that as well, because people are like, I'm not going to do this for this amount of money. I'm leaving. Some of them are career changers, right? So they're coming into the field with these altruistic, I'm going to come in, I'm going to work with kids and help them. And then there's a reality. I have to pay a mortgage, right? And so you go through the whole process, and then you end up and say, let's discuss salary. And you're like, oh my God, I can't live off of this, right? So we have to look at salaries as well as, are they commiserate with pulling in the best and brightest, right? And you talked about making it attractive, right? That is one way we do that.
I totally agree. Salaries is a huge thing. I still have teachers that are working 2 and 3 jobs. So after they're in school for 7.5 hours teaching kids, they go to another job so that they can live in the area that we live in and teach in the area that they're teaching in. I think the other thing, when you're talking about offers, you made an offer to someone, but now they have 7 schools that have made that offer to them because there's just not enough teachers. We still have 2 positions in my building that have not been filled by certified teachers. And our county has been creative in how to fill those, but I know my colleagues have sometimes 7 and 8 positions that haven't been filled. And people in the high school area, they don't have planning anymore because they're going to cover a class, or they're putting kids in auditoriums to put a body in front of them because there's no teacher for that class. So salaries is a huge, it's a huge deal. People can sit home with their pajama bottoms on and a shirt and tie and make, twice as much more money as a teacher. Who wouldn't go for that? So I think making the job more attractive, raising those teacher salaries, and while the incentive of loan forgiveness is great, not have to worry about that, but that salary range still needs to increase for teachers, because they're not done at 4 o'clock. They have papers to grade. They're working with lesson plans on the weekends. They're texting their colleagues. It's not an 8 to 4 job for a teacher. It's today, teachers have to make that time for themselves, because otherwise they would be consumed by school all the time, because they're so committed to providing every student every day with whatever it takes for kids to learn.
And so whenever all of those facets of our job are not in alignment, it creates an incredible amount of stress for us as principals to carry out our school improvement plan, to carry out our professional learning, everything. It just derails some things. And I mean, in Maryland, to add on to the challenge with staffing, and the state legislator put in a bill or a law now for greater background checks, long story short. And it's very well intended, but it means that it takes twice as long, 3 times as long to clear somebody to work. So I love the intent of it, but there has to be some way to get them out there provisionally, get them processed, provisionally working. And if something, I don't even know the statistics of how many of those folks get red flagged and aren't able to be hired, but at least get them out provisionally. And if something red flags, then they're out. But we gotta think a little bit differently.
Yep. Just to add one more thing, a lot of times when there's vacancies in districts, the teacher candidates, they have several options, several places that they can go. And a lot of times, you can look on Maryland report card or whatever state you're in, and you can see the school that kind of struggles and academically and things like that. So a lot of times those teacher candidates, they're going to take the schools that are more affluent, schools that are not in marginalized areas and things like that. So which then leads that great divide of, those schools that are in marginalized areas, they're not getting, that qualified candidate, which then widens that achievement gap and things like that.
Thank you, Sam, for bringing that up, because I also wanted to ask about that. Sue talked about accommodations that schools are making when you don't have enough staff. I spoke with a principal who couldn't find a special education teacher, and so he combined 2 classes to get through the year. And he, pretty much said he would rather have smaller classrooms with 2 teachers, but he doesn't have another teacher. Another principal who had to move an interventionist into a special ed class because that's an easier hire than finding a special ed teacher. And I wonder if you guys can speak about what does that mean for the long-term education of kids if you have folks that you would not have hired, 3 years ago because you had so many people applying, or you kind of just searching around for, I don't want to say anybody, but you just really want somebody to be in front of kids.
I think we ultimately do our students a real big disservice because I know, like in Florida, they're taking, and I love the military, but they're taking ex-military who have no experience, and they're in other states they're taking people with not even a degree, and they're just placing them in classrooms, and it really does our kids a real big disservice. It's like taking a doctor or a pilot that never went to pilot school and just sticking them on an airplane. It just doesn't make any sense. And I think that but then on the flip side, it's like you have a class of 35, 40 students, and how are you gonna teach the 35, 40 students and you're just one body? So it puts school administration at it's just a bad position, and that's why I said I think the Grow Your Own program, putting those staff members who are support staff in the classrooms because they're already doing the work, I think that helps. I think partnering with the university level, that helps the student teachers and things like that. But you just have to really, really be creative.
Do the staffing challenges pose a risk to all the work you're going to have to do around learning loss and academic recovery from the COVID era?
Well, I don't say pose a risk, but I think we as leaders recognize that we are responsible for the teaching and learning that takes place in our buildings, right? And so if I'm forced to have a long-term substitute, is what we call them, right, that's in the building, then I need to make sure that that person has all the supports they need to make sure that they're doing their job effectively and teaching my students, that they're learning, right? So if it means working, let's say if it's a Spanish teacher, that she or he is working with the team leader from, the World Language Department to ensure that the instruction taking place in that classroom is quality instruction, that the kids are learning. I'm in there. I'm watching and seeing what's happening. Is learning taking place? If it's not, then we have to make a change. So that's part of the responsibility of the school leader, is to make sure that teaching and learning is taking place in your building. And so while it's not ideal to have a long-term sub in that position, when you do have to resort to that, it's your responsibility to monitor to make sure that it's effective.
Thank you, Robert. We'll take a couple of questions from the audience, but before we do that, just wanted to find out if anyone wanted to add to what Robert said. No? Okay. Jen?
You have a microphone for questions.
Hi, Maria Salmeron here. I'm a fellow constituent from Silver Spring, Maryland, and current Congressional Black Caucus Foundation Fellow. And something that I found very promising about this panel is that there's a lot of focus and emphasis on social emotional learning, which is super compelling. But my question to the panel, beginning with you, Congressman, and then moving on to everyone else, is what do we do and like how do we move the needle when there isn't buy-in for social emotional learning implementation? So starting with you, Congressman, like when there isn't buy-in from the political leadership sort of perspective and then from the school staff sort of perspective.
Thank you very much, and thank you for living in Maryland's beautiful 8th Congressional District. I appreciate that. I think this is going to be a central struggle. There have been a kind of a sequence of targets within public schools. Certain books are targeted, or what's called critical race theory is targeted, or, respecting the LGBTQ kids is being targeted. And now it looks like some people are coming after social and emotional learning, which is an extraordinary thing. But I think that's maybe not a bad place to plant the flag in favor of public education and teachers and principals and guidance counselors and school psychologists and what the educational system is. There are people who want to make life as, nasty, brutish, and short as possible, and then keep other people from dealing with the consequences of that, So I don't have any magic answer to your question other than to say I think it's critical that everybody get invested in defending it. We need to double down on investment in taking care of young people and kids and paying attention to everybody's psychological and emotional well-being. In the authoritarian societies and the autocratic societies, the psychological and emotional health of the population is basically irrelevant. Just like the physical health. If anything, it's a threat to the people in charge. But if we're going to have a democracy, then we need everybody at their best physical, emotional, and mental health. We need everybody involved to be both self-governing individually, but also to be participating in the government of our schools, in our towns, in our counties, in our states, and the government, and so on. And I think we're seeing in this election, maintaining the strict nonpartisanship of the proceeding and everything, but I think we're seeing in this election what it's like to have people running for very high office who are extremely imbalanced and pose a danger to everybody else.
I can add on to your question. I think elementary principals, especially, not to make light or greater or less emphasis for middle and high school folks, but we have a great responsibility in the elementary level. We get kids where we're teaching them what it's like to be a student, how to interact as early as kindergarten, preschool, and that gives us a great opportunity to implement social emotional learning. We block out time. I don't think we have enough time because I feel like it's rushed, but we have an awesome responsibility to really teach kids how to interact, how to regulate themselves, how to care for one another. And we only carve out 15 minutes a day for CEL in our school. And it's at random times because doing an elementary schedule is like Tetris. It's just frustrating, especially when it comes at you fast. But I think I wish we could, don't tell Dr. M this, but I think if we could just carve out a little bit of the academic time and invest it more into the CEL time, I think the benefits will reap themselves academically and climate-wise within our school.
I think your question dealt more with buy-in, right? And I'll give you a good example. Last year, my kids came to me and they were like, Mr. Motley, we're stressed. Like, we need a day where we just like can chill and veg. You know, I'm using their language, right? And so, but they said they didn't want the adults to control it, right? Because normally what happens is that the teachers put up, oh, I'm interested in, you know, knitting, and then they offer a knitting option, and then, oh, I'm interested in puzzles, and they offer a puzzle option. And the kids really don't generate that. The kids have to kind of, all right, I guess I'll go there because there's nowhere else I'd like to go. And so the kids are like, we want to decide what it is that we want to have offered to the kids, and then the teachers sign up for it. So they're flipping the script a little bit, right? And so I said, all right, let's do it. And so the staff said to me, well, if they're going to decide, then we don't want anything to do with it, right? And I said, okay, well, you will just show up then. We'll assign you to a place, and then you just show up. And so the kids came up with all these great things. There's yoga. We hired a video truck to come in and, you know, do that. And there was cornhole, like all these different activities that the kids came up with. And so we assigned staff to it. And they had to leave their classrooms, and some of them were not happy about it, right? But at the end of the day, because it was a day, no books, nothing was allowed. The entire day was just we called it a stressless day, right? And just a day full of activities, and they would, you know, we had like 5 activities that were like an hour each, and they would like rotate through them. And at the end, the staff said, next year we want to be more involved in the process, you know, because it ended up being a great day at the school. It was just a stressless day for everyone. And so just having opportunities like that, like the kids came to me and said, Mr. Motley, can we do this? And I said, we're going to make it happen. But there wasn't initial buy-in from the staff on it because they weren't in control of it. And when they saw that the kids actually could do this and pull it off, then okay, how can we make it better for next year? And it was a really great activity. So there wasn't initial buy-in, but eventually they came around understanding that it was really a great concept and a thought behind it. So.
Mm-hmm. Oh, good afternoon. My name is Barbara Childs, and I'm from the Council of School Officers and DCASSP. And one thing I wanted to say, that when I was in school just a couple of years ago, the principal was the mainstay of the building. You went to the principal, and he or she answered your questions, and you received the feedback. Now, someone on the panel mentioned that we have a lot of younger principals. They don't stay in the job for 30 years or 25 years like the principal of old. Some of us reject what the more seasoned principals did, but I think it was a plus. Why don't the principals stay in the job for longer than 3 or 5 years? They need support. And unfortunately, on the higher level, above the principals, they're not getting the support or the training that they need. And I don't think a lot of us realize that education or public school education is a trendsetter. You know, we set the trend that other organizations or groups will follow. At one point, career education was the goal. Every high school had a program where they train students to become managers or even carpenters. I shouldn't say even carpenters, but carpenters or plumbers. Or auto mechanics. We no longer have that. So along the way, we are losing our students. Every student is not going to go to a 4-year college. They might go to a 2-year internship or apprenticeship, but they're not going to go to a 4-year college. We need our principals to be trained in the problems that our children are facing. We mentioned mental health. most of us do not know how to deal with mental health and stress in our schools. So we're not only losing the teachers, but we're losing the students. And I don't know how we can do that. I think someone mentioned that teachers become principals, but they don't. You have a 25-year-old principal in a school, he or she has never been a teacher. He or she has never been an assistant principal. What we need is to have more support for our school leaders. And unfortunately, I'm not seeing a lot of that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Closing remarks from any of the panelists, and then we'll.
Thank you, Jen. I would just want to give the opportunity to anyone on the panel, if you want to share anything before we say thank you to our in-person and online audience.
So, all of you that know me know that I can be a little bit vocal sometimes, but no, right? But I would like to throw out a challenge to NAESP, a challenge to NASSP, and a challenge to AFSA. And that is to come together and develop a document of some sort that really highlights working conditions, professional development, pipeline interests. Like, how do we, as three top organizations representing school leaders, come together and really unite to say, this is what needs to happen for us to create effective leaders and to keep that pipeline open. And it involves training and professional development, but it also involves looking at working conditions, because people are rejecting the principalship because they're on 24/7 and they don't want to be on 24. Ed talked about he had to set boundaries, and he's a seasoned principal. So imagine someone new coming into the job not having that ability to set those boundaries. It's overwhelming. And so we as three organizations should come together and put something out and say, listen, if we really want to have effective leaders move into these positions that are becoming vacant, this is what needs to happen. These are the conditions that need to be into place. And so so that's my charge, and hopefully it's taken, and I will do whatever I can to help in creating that document as well. So thank you.
So with NASSP, I am a part of the educator pipeline, and you can look on the NASSP website. There's a survey of work that we've already done over the summer with other school leaders across the country to address the educator pipeline and things like that. But I would also say is that education, this is a selfless job, right? Students are always at the center of all of our work, all right? And we have to be empathetic, we have to be understanding, but we also have to meet their needs, right? And also, while we're doing that, we gotta balance it and meet the needs of our staff and ourselves, right? So one of the things that I always say that if you want to make a difference within your community, I was an accounting major earlier in my college career, and I just so happened to have a conversation with someone at the Morgan State Bridge, Morgan State plug right there. But, and he was like, man, you know, we really are looking for educators, you know, that can make a difference within their community. And I took my first education class, and I never looked back. And that was about 17 years ago. So one thing, it's been the best decision that I've ever made in my life. And, you know, my goal in life is to produce other educators, you know, under me, and to let them know, like, this is work that it's necessary in our society, but it's selfless work, and the students' outcomes matter the most. So thank you all for having me here.
Congressman Rask.
Well, thank you for having me and letting me, I feel like a little bit of an imposter on this panel since I'm not doing what you guys do, but thank you for, you know, sharing what it's like on the inside of running the schools. I guess my closing thought is really about the way that the founders of our country always believed that the fate of democracy was so intertwined with education and the ability to teach young people about the Constitution, about the laws, about norms of civility and participatory action. When I was a kid, the principal was basically seen as, number one, a disciplinarian, and number two, maybe an administrator. And I love hearing you all talk about the principal as a leader in the community, and I think that that's true. And I would also love to see that document that talks about principals as leaders and how to recruit leaders and train them and bring them up through the educational process and maybe through other domains of social life. I think that that's really important. And there's clearly a war going on in our country against a lot of public things, public buildings and public values and public schools and parks and so on. And I think now is a time for the rest of us to be defending and supporting, as I think Barbara has said, supporting principals and supporting teachers and supporting librarians and supporting people in the public school enterprise.
You're not an imposter. Your presence here is in support of, and so we thank you for that.
So my last comment is, the work is hard, but our kids are worth it.
Well, I want to thank everybody for being here. I think I've been a part of National Principals Month yearly for the last few years, and I enjoy being an advocate and a voice for principals all over the country. I think we've had one of the most tumultuous times in our lives and in our professions with COVID, and that was definitely a tipping point. And optimistically, I think we've gotten over that, for the most part, over that hurdle, but that definitely has led to a new tipping point. And I want to add on to Mr. Motley here, continue with that challenge to not let this be a 1 month advocacy, 1 month recognition. We need to continue this dialogue until we see the change that we need to do the job effectively and beyond effective. I'm thrilled to be a part of the process, both as a member of the American Federation of School Administrators and active board member of NAESP. I would be on NASSP, but I can't join that. I don't have the credentials for it. But hey, I know he's trying to get me to go secondary. But I thoroughly enjoy the work. I love what I do. I love serving my community. I love the 6-year span of seeing a child grow from an early learner and then sending them off to middle school. So I love my work day in and day out, and I can only be optimistic for the future.
Thank you so much. Please say thank you to this extraordinary panel. Thanks everyone for joining us. Have a good afternoon. Happy Principals Month.